Welcome to the Sober by Design podcast, where we explore the many pathways to recovery and a better life through conversations with a wide array of guests. Whether you're sober curious, in recovery, or simply looking to improve your mental health and well-being, this podcast will have something for you. Each week, we sit down with inspiring guests from all walks of life who share their personal stories of struggle and triumph, offering valuable insights and practical advice on how to design a life worth living. From addiction and mental health to spirituality and creativity, we cover a wide range of topics that are relevant to anyone seeking to live a more fulfilling and authentic life. So join us on this journey of discovery, growth, and transformation, and start designing a new life. All right, everybody, welcome to the Sober by Design podcast. Today I have a special guest. I've known Pete for quite a while via a parasocial relationship on Instagram. So today we have Pete White, better known to most of the people in the online recovery world as Pete on Repeat. So for me, this is a big one and one that I've been waiting for a while. So welcome, Pete.
It's great to be here. I'm always taken back by how people want me on their podcasts. There's a reason that I write. It's because I don't speak very well at all, but thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, great.
Good to see your face.
Good to see
talk to you one-on-one.
Yes.
After so many years, for sure.
Yeah, we've known each other, I think, online for probably close to, I'd say 6 years, somewhere in that ballpark.
It's about that, yeah.
Yeah, which seems crazy.
Yeah, for those people that are, we are seeing face-to-face for the first time, talking face-to-face. And I can tell you that if you can't see us, you're not missing much at all.
Voice or faces made for radio, is that?
That's right. Yeah, you got it.
So we normally start this off by just talking a little bit about your past and what led you to, drinking. So if you can give us a little bit of an idea of who you were as a child, where you grew up, and then kind of what led to that you're drinking. That's all.
Sounds good.
Start there.
I grew up in Canada, southern Canada, just across the river from Detroit. And growing up, I wasn't actually exposed to a lot of alcohol in my home. My dad would be the holiday drinker, sometimes drunk driving home on Christmas Eve, that type of thing. But it wasn't a daily thing in my family in terms of substance use disorder. I will flip back and forth those terms as well. It's hard to keep on that one all the time. So I'm a good old alcoholic, and I like to refer to myself that way. It just makes it easier and people understand it a little bit more. But I wasn't exposed to a lot of booze. I was, however, exposed to substances. My dad was a chronic pot smoker. Many days, day after day, I was actually kind of experience a residual high oftentimes because, being in the next room, I'd wake up high going to high school, that type of thing. So dad was a pot smoker. Mom worked in a pharmaceutical company. So mom had access to pills. So mom had a propensity for tranquilizers. Dad smoked pot all the time. So it's terrible. But it built a framework at that point that made me want to vehemently reject any sort of substance like pills or drugs or illicit sort of drugs. So I was actually in high school. I was on a council to help other kids to try to assuage them from not doing drugs and alcohol. But I remember just, growing up, I felt like I had a reasonable childhood. The only time that the pot really interfered in my life was on those mornings that I'd wake up higher, which sounds very dramatic, but it was, in retrospect, it was awful, but at the time it didn't seem as though it was such a hindrance. So there were those sort of experiences. It used to drive me crazy when my dad would get stoned and want to talk to me. So as a teenager, my dad was suddenly very funny and wanted to joke. And there's those instances. And being in a border town, we often traveled across the river to Detroit. And I just remember the perpetual fear because my dad he couldn't go anywhere without having a joint with him somewhere. So every time we'd cross over the states to go to a baseball game, etc., I knew that we had pot in tow. So But I mean, those are really the only things that I remember of great detriment. I was a fairly good student. I mean, I think I sort of developed those sort of anxieties as a teenager that most teenagers develop. And I remember the first time that I was coerced into drinking alcohol. I mean, peer pressure, I guess. I obviously nobody held a gun to my head, but I did it. And I remember thinking, like, this is beyond measure, this feeling that I'm experiencing right now. I am not afraid anymore. I am not scared. I don't care about what time it is. I don't care if I'm late for anything. I just remember being very swept away initially, almost immediately. And I was one of those people that had, in the alcoholic world, I guess I was one of those people that had the fortune of not getting hungover the first few times. So I didn't sort of experience the after effects. I just felt this tremendous release ultimately that I've never felt ever in my entire life. And I knew then that it was going to be a problem. So that propelled me. And then, of course, I went to university, and then, that's what you do in university. That's a socially accepted sort of behavior. And it just propelled and got worse and worse from there, obviously.
Yeah. So you were in your teen years when you started high school?
And yeah, even like I was of legal age in Canada. In Ontario, it was 19. So I mean, I was of legal.
Your first drink.
Yeah, and I remember being so against it that I was 19 of age. I had the only one in the group, because my birthday's early in the year, that was able to go to the liquor store and buy it. And I remember having to get an older friend to do it just because I was so ashamed and it felt so awful and wrong to do.
Okay. Well,
whip pan 20 years later.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I started at 18, same kind of thing, same feeling, almost that same idea of like, okay, there's no more fear. It just felt really good, and I kind of knew at that moment that I probably opened Pandora's box, right? Like,
yeah,
it was like, oh no, can I shut this?
Like, oh, this is Jesus. This is what they talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was so against it too, leading up into that point, right? I was the last of my friends to drink, and but so against it because I grew up around it, just like you. And it was like this sort of totally opposite reaction. Okay, these are how my parents are. I'm going to be the opposite. And then somehow try it once and you turn into your folks in some form, right? So that was interesting. So you went to university. You obviously partied through university. Coming out of university, what happens?
Well, in the time frame of university, I met my first wife.
Okay.
And we are now several years into our divorce, and we finally sort of come to an area at which we have a great friendship. And it took a lot of work to get there, obviously, because things were messy. But a lot of my drinking was fueled by that relationship as well. And nothing against her, obviously. But she was also in the phase in which we would party, and we would party several nights a week. And that for me personally built the framework of our relationship. And that's what, I mean, at that immature age, that's what I felt the relationship was based upon. So as we grew up together and got older, she decided that she wanted to grow up. And I was completely left in the dust. I was like, I don't think that you understand. Like, this is who I am. Like, this is what we built together. In my mindset, obviously, it was in a very, alcoholic mindset where it was just me. But it was, I just could not believe that one day. It felt like one day, but looking back in retrospect, it was prodding and poking for many, many years to sort of get my shit together. But it was, it just felt like I was completely betrayed in that. So I kept drinking, and we had a son together, and that didn't stop me. I kept going as well. Mm-hmm. And the issue that I had in my early 20s, 30s was that I was a tremendous functional alcoholic, quote unquote functional alcoholic. So, I didn't miss work. I always made sure the house was clean when she got home, and I picked up all the slack. So I had the excuse to continue to do what I was doing, because for all intents and purposes, the machine was operating. So it was yeah, it was poking and prodding for years, and then ultimately, I mean, my ass was handed to me. I had my moment when she left me at the age of 38. I was then, and it was a Thursday evening that will live in my memories forever. It was the worst, best day of my life. I got home from work, and she had her bags packed with my son, and that was the moment there. That was the moment where I seriously contemplated suicide. I was at that time frame in my life. I was morning drinking, day drinking, evening drinking, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. Every day was a holiday, and sneaking booze into the house in my socks, in Mickey's small 13-ounce bottles, and I I came very close to ending it all that evening, and that was my come to Jesus moment, as it were. But it was yeah, very 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 instrumental, obviously, in my recovery, because it was the day that I decided to. I felt I had no choice other than either end my life or begin my life.
Right.
Unfortunately, some circumstances that evening that she left sort of led me into the direction where I was so angry and so betrayed that my anger, ultimately, anger is a tool, and it fueled me for a solid year. And the anger of her leaving, and the just the primal feeling of, well, yeah, fuck you, was what propelled me for, like I said, a good year at the very least.
Yeah. It's interesting because I always say that, like, I've known you again online. We've known each other. I've watched your story. I've seen who you are, and there's so many similarities in our story, right? And so many little things that are similar. And one is that idea that you were functional, whatever that means, and that you were able to keep things going. You kept a job, you cleaned the house, you did all these things. And for me, that was always sort of an excuse to keep it going, right? Like, I can do all this stuff. And like, I was giving, to your point, giving myself permission, even though there was this voice in the background going, you got to stop, you got to change. This isn't working. There's something wrong, right? And it wasn't only my wife's voice, it was my voice. Like, I'd wake up in the morning and I felt like garbage. And I would always say, like, my thing would be, I'd go to my wife Renee and go, like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I think I have a disease, right? And I'd go to the doctor and, like, why can't you find anything? Meanwhile, like, I had been up the night before polishing off a bottle of gin. Like, of course there's something wrong with my insides and I feel like they're going to come out, But like, for me, it was like, I could still do that, have that little half-hour blip in the morning, and then go to work and succeed, right? I managed to get an MBA throughout my drinking. Like, there was a lot of things that I did that, if you were on the outside, you're like, nothing's wrong with this picture. But meanwhile, in the house, every night, it was like it felt a little bit unstable all the time, right? There was like this instability, this constant underline of instability. I'm sure you felt that too, but you could kind of push it aside, right? Like, oh, it's not me, right?
Oh yeah, for certain. And I mean, in my marriage as well. Like, I mean, and the misunderstanding about people that are facing addiction is that we are so stupid. Like, I was smoking at the time as well. So, like, smoking cigarettes and drinking, it's the epitome of, like, why don't you get your shit together type of thing. But we know, like, I knew I was killing myself, but I've come to the conclusion that that was the best option. But I mean, ultimately, my marriage, my relationship, like, I knew I was hurting my wife. I knew I was.
Yeah.
But I was so entrenched in the feeling, the only thing that made that feeling of hurting her and that shame and regret and everything go away was the very thing that was causing me, to kill myself. Like, it was just, and it's just cyclical. And the more you do it, the more you have to do it. And yeah, it's funny. I think it's like you mentioned, you got your MBA. That's remarkable. I managed a store that sold pencils. So, but I think you should applaud your accomplishment.
But it's just like, again, if you're on the outside, yeah, some people probably saw some cracks, but for the most part, people saw, like, someone like yourself or myself, like, they got it fine. And I think that also kind of played into it, right? It just kind of was like, well, Pete's the fun guy that comes to a party and he has drinks. And, that kind of became the identity, which also further bolstered how I felt. And I'm sure bolstered how you felt to some extent, right? So it was like
For sure.
this positive feedback that you're getting out in the world a little bit, which wasn't helpful, and extended that past the time. I mean, you said you were 38. I was 35 when I got sober. I can't remember exactly, but similar timeline and similar experience. I mean, to be honest, I think I went to an AA meeting the morning that my wife was going to pack up the bags and take my 2 kids. Like, like that was that, it was coming, right? Like I knew that morning, like, well, if I don't do something today, this party is going to end. And it was probably a 50-50 shot if those bags were packed. So you obviously spent a year working on yourself after that moment, and I know that you've done a ton of work. What did that year look like? Was it just you by yourself, or did you reach out, or how did you go about that year?
I was fortunate enough to have the wherewithal at work to have options for counseling. So my initial sort of entrance into recovery was through that one-on-one counseling. I had a very nice fellow that was able to sort of talk me through the initial motions. I tried AA a few times in that first few months, and the experience that I had, and obviously don't get me wrong, I know it does a lot of good. I've read the big book. I appreciate the big book. I listen to it and read it still. But my experience, I was in such a pink cloud phase. Like there was once I'd learned to harness that anger and learn how to fly with it, I felt so just so untouchable that when I would go to an AA meeting, a few that I went to, I felt that I left feeling a lot worse than when I got there. And it was, once again, I had not turned the page yet. I was still in the initial phases of recovery. I hadn't learned a lot. I was still in a very me mindset. But I would go to the meetings and say, man, these people are depressed. Like, what do I want to hang around these people for? But, I mean, at the same time, I had the fortune of starting my Instagram and have like this sudden like group of people that were just like, I don't know this guy. He's bald. He likes the color orange. I love this guy. So I just had this great community suddenly that was just behind me. And to go, and I mean, the value that I still get out of AA when I'm reading the documents or listening to podcasts is the commonality of us as people. We're all the same person, basically, with different stories. But so I mean, that commonality obviously is very important. But in the initial first parts of my life in recovery, I was so consumed by shame. Like, for me, the failure in the marriage was the most defeated I've ever been. Mm-hmm. And being able to, obviously your marriage generally is a very public thing. People know that you're married, and suddenly when you're not together anymore, people have questions, right? And the initial sort of reaction to that was, I can't do this over and over again. I can't have this friend ask me and that friend ask me. I can't do it. So that's why the Instagram started. I just needed to pop on social media. It was the most brave thing I have ever done. And I think the first place I did it was Facebook. And I just said, hey, everybody, I'm not married anymore. I'm a drunk. Let's move forward.
Yeah.
And it was just a Band-Aid that I needed to pull off because I could not contend with the shame day after day after day after day. So having that forum, and fortunately, I think we live in a very different time now than it was 8 years ago. Fortunately, I was not met by trolls. I wasn't met by anybody with anything negative. I just found a bunch of people that really wanted to support me and help me out.
Yeah.
Among them was yourself, obviously, but so many other people like us who understood.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I still feel like Instagram's like a little bit of a safe haven online, but I do see a little negativity coming around us. Not a ton.
Yeah,
but
I get it every now and then.
Yeah.
I just tell myself, you've made it, Pete.
I think that, one thing that you mentioned about AA is it is a very... Listen, AA is strange because you can go in one room and have one vibe, another room and have a completely different vibe. I got sober in the rooms of AA. And for me, it worked. And for me, it was more the community, the accountability. And then at some point, it didn't work anymore. I love the big book. I love the 12 steps. I think they are, great ways to live. But then at some point, I felt like I needed to control my recovery story. And it sounds like you wanted to control your recovery story earlier on. And that's how you found Instagram. And for you, I think it was spot on because your writing resonated with me like right away, I think. And you built a following and all the people that we all, it's a small group of us, I think. Not a small group, but there's a lot of people that are still around that joined right around that time of, what would you say, 2018-ish?
It was 2018. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think it's been interesting to watch that group grow, and most of those people have hung around. I mean, I was thinking about the other day, there's a couple that have kind of fallen off, but I check in with a lot of those folks, and you see some of them have written books now, and some of them have really skyrocketed to fame. But I think it all came around for me. Part of it was, and I don't know if you know, but like the home podcast got me, right? Like Laura and Holly, they were very instrumental in my early recovery. And, the book thing, I know that you've danced around it, but there's other things that I want to talk about. So at the same point I found your Instagram, I found somebody else's Instagram, and she was writing about her life on the other side of alcoholism. Tell me a little bit about that story, if you can, because I think...
Who are you talking about?
Who am I talking about? I don't know. I don't know who I'm talking about. You tell me who I'm talking about.
Initially, I didn't know, to be honest with you. Like, well, hope she doesn't listen to this one. About 6 months into my recovery, I guess the major practice I think that a lot of us do on Instagram is just type in #sober, and just it makes an opportunity to find the people that are undergoing the same sort of issues, etc. And I did that, and it was in March, and I found this really just gut-wrenching post by her name her handle at the time was Dear Mr. Budweiser.
Yes.
And her account was basically a journal that she had made anonymously to her husband who had been drinking substantially. He was an alcoholic. So this post was about her sitting. It was a digital clock was the picture at 4:33 in the morning. And the journal entry just basically said, Dear Mr. Budweiser, to paraphrase, where are you tonight? But in several very articulate, beautiful, eloquent paragraphs. And I was immediately hit by her writing. And obviously it resonated with me because it was the other side of my story. It was the wife that had been wondering, where was I? And but with her husband. So I reached out because I felt, what, I might have an opportunity to help these folks. And I just said, listen, you're the other half of my story. I am so happy to help you if you ever need anything. If your husband ever needs anything, just reach out. And so I DM'd her, and then she DM'd me back shortly thereafter. And we started to talk and communicate back and forth about her life, my life, etc. And in that time frame, we became friends. And it didn't take long after that for her to realize that her husband was not going to decide her over the beer alcohol, and they ended up getting divorced. So that was a span of a few years, 4 years maybe, that we maintained this friendship. And like I said, initially it was completely anonymous. I didn't have any idea what she looked like, etc. And we maintained a very sort of cordial relationship. And after she got divorced, we decided that we would like to meet each other. So we did this very low-key date and went to Niagara Falls. And I picked her up at the Detroit airport, and we drove to Niagara Falls. And we just immediately got along so well, so far beyond what we'd ever imagined. And we got married a couple months ago. So We were able to maintain this love story online a little bit, and it sort of meanders through my Instagram, and it's it's been absolutely incredible. She's been the best gift I've ever had. So.
Yeah, I mean, I about the same time I found you on Instagram, I believe I found the Budweiser account as well. I don't know if, it was just through a search or how it happened, but again, I was following that story. I was following you. I had no idea that there was any convergence. I think when I found out the two stories converged was, I believe she reached out to me to write a letter or something. I think I wrote a actual physical
Yes.
letter. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's probably when I knew something. And it still was just it was kind of presented to me in like, hey, I have a good friend. You might know him, and so and then obviously I started to see some posts, and I saw the posts about the dates, and I've kind of been following along, and I think it's awesome that both of you have found happiness, on this side of recovery, and the fact that you now have this blended family, and it looks from the outside that you guys are 100% at peace. You've relocated. Is that true?
That is true. Yes, I am currently residing in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
So I made the move from Canada to the hottest place on the planet.
How's that going for you? How is the transition?
It's been phenomenal. I
Yeah.
mean, the actual locale is very similar to where I'm from, apart from the heat. So I'm used to this sort of like suburban area that I'm in here. The family is, I mean, lots of hiccups every day. Obviously, suddenly dad's in the house. Like there's, I have two kids, two stepchildren now.
Mm-hmm.
5 and 7 years old. So my son is back in Canada still. He decided that he wanted to stay with his mom. Understandably so. He's a very social fellow. And we had come to terms with the fact that it would be okay for me to move because we have such a strong relationship. So we still communicate through FaceTime quite frequently, and he visits often. So he's set to come see me in a couple weeks. But yeah, we settled here because Stephanie she's a very prolific wedding photographer here. So her business is fantastic, and it's been interesting moving to the U.S. Not as different as I expected, but it's been great thus far.
Good.
But yeah, it's been work. It's a lot of work getting this family to sort of like be cohesive, but it's rewarding, and we're working on it every day, and it feels good most days. So.
And your son's in high school now, so
Yes.
he's probably a little bit more prepared for something like this.
Yes.
I think looking back as a child of divorce, I think I probably would have been better prepared if it all just happened then. Right? For me, like personally, I think I would have been in a better mind state. I don't know, maybe not, but I know because my parents lived close enough where I could do the every other weekend thing, but also far enough away that it was like we had a midpoint drop off, and
Gotcha.
and it was a little bit challenging for me as a kid. But there was other challenges there, right? Like both my parents had sort of addiction problems, and it was a whole nightmare. But anyway, I think he's probably mentally at a better point. So I 100% love that you guys talk on FaceTime, and I can see again from afar that bond there.
Well, that's another thing to mention. I mean, the co-parenting element, obviously that initial hatred that I had for my ex-wife was unfounded. There was no, basis in that. It was obviously just me looking at it through my lens, and having met Stephanie, like she was able to sort of introduce my ex-wife's mindset and what she saw, and it was very helpful. And it's interesting because my ex-wife has been very supportive about me moving to Canada. Right. Yeah, of course. Go away, man.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
No, she's been very supportive of it, and it's actually my Stephanie and my ex-wife have actually they text each other now, and it's come farther. My relationship with my ex-wife has come farther than I ever imagined. We are better friends than we ever were, and it's incredible. It's
That's
amazing.
awesome.
And I mean, I give a lot of credit to her for sure, because during the initial parts of my recovery, I was very angry and very egotistical, and obviously did exactly the opposite of what I think she expected me to do, and that's get sober and tell the whole world. But she's been very supportive.
Yeah. I also know early in your recovery, you kind of found ways to support yourself through fitness, and you definitely do a lot of things for yourself in your recovery. What are some of those tools that you use, long term on a daily basis? Like, I see you do things that I would never do. But you're out there doing, you're going on adventures and all sorts of stuff. So give me a little insight into that. Was that you beforehand and you pulled it out, or is this
No,
all new?
I'm so, as an individual, riddled with anxiety. Like, I couldn't cross the street with a hot drink in my hand before I got sober. Like, just scared shitless of everything. But the way I sort of looked at it is that evening that the shit hit the fan for me, it was like a starting point. It was like, I very nearly killed myself. So if I die in the woods by myself camping because a bear's eaten me, that's a better story. So I just quite truly, I looked at, like, I have given myself an opportunity to die in a better manner now, which is just, it sounds stupid, but that was sort of what got me moving in terms of the camping and hiking and adventuring on my own. But I mean, from an actual standpoint of recovery, and I think the most valuable tool that I accessed rather, was my ability to journal.
Okay.
And I necessarily, I don't think anybody has to, tell the world their story, but telling yourself your story is definitely one of the biggest things you can do for yourself. And the reason it helped me is it actually allowed me to formulate how I was feeling. You don't have to be the best writer in the world, just point form even. This is how I feel today, and this is why I feel this way today. And it allows you to sort things out. And I mean, from the standpoint of getting sober, is a lot of it is just being a broken person. And if you don't know how to feel and don't know what you're feeling, you can't fix yourself. So I think just having that tool of being able to look at, this is how I feel today, this is why I feel it, and this is what I'm going to do to not feel this way tomorrow. And what that did for me ultimately is, like, it gave me a plan, but it also gave me a reference point. Even to this day, 8 years sober, some of the biggest value I get is going back and look at myself at 2 years and reading something that I've written and thinking, wow, you were still very much an asshole back then, Peter. But that's it. Like, this is an opportunity for you to look at who you were, who you are, and who you want to be. And I think it's just, like I said, the most valuable thing you can do is write down how you're feeling. And then, I mean, I started running as well almost immediately too. And the primary reason I started running is because my ex-wife was a runner. And I hated that she did it. I hated running. I hate running, but I did it because I just wanted to do something better than her.
Okay.
And that was it. And for a while I did. And then I quit smoking and then started eating, peanut butter straight from the jar. So I've put on some weight since then, but I'm still active. And like a lot of my adventures that you're speaking to, I'm a big camper. I like going camping, and I've done a lot of camping by myself. So
Yeah, I mean, I see you out in the wilderness by yourself, and I'm like, wow. I mean, I love the idea of it, but I would actually be nervous. I don't know if I could sleep out there by myself. Like, that would be the hardest part for me. It's just the sleeping part.
well,
Um,
from that point, I was deathly afraid of sleeping outside when I was drinking, and the way that I could do it was by polishing off a bottle of Captain Morgan's. So so when you're first getting sober, as I think anyone can attest to, is it's just this giant fear of wondering what you can do or what you're going to be able to do henceforth without your best friend, alcohol.
yeah.
So for me, it was just an exercise. And like I said, this is my new life. This is an opportunity to give up my old shit. And here we go. So that's where I'm at.
I
Yeah.
think I think it's interesting because I was talking to my wife about this the other day in regard to just change, and I feel like people who have found recovery and have been able to maintain it for a while are pretty good at change, right? We can introduce new habits. We're probably a little bit more open to it. We're open to suggestion, at least I am. Although she reminded me that for a good 15 years, I was probably the one person in the house that was open to no suggestion of not drinking, right? But now I feel very capable of hey, I'll try biking or I'll try, knitting or, yeah, I would love to try that hobby, right? And I think it is one of the benefits of recovery for me is my willingness to try things and then be able to stick to them a little bit longer than in the past. When I was drinking, I would try hobbies, give them up quick. You just said you stopped running a little bit, but I'm sure you could pick it up again now because you've done it and you know that you can
Mhm.
do hard things. I just, when you're drinking, sometimes it's hard to imagine doing anything other than drinking. And, for you, you've done a lot of changing. Do you continue to see this as like an evolution of yourself in recovery? I had a friend the other day ask me, "Are you ever recovered or are you like in a perpetual state?" And I said, "I think I'm in a perpetual state of bettering myself." Is that how you feel?
I do. I was just having this very same conversation with Stephanie. It's. I was very much defined by my recovery for a long period of time because it was incredibly relevant in every day. My active thoughts were directed towards how am I not going to drink today?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do today to make me not drink, right? And obviously with time habit forms and it's not so much work any longer. So my mindset has changed from what am I going to do today to not drink to what am I grateful for today? Like what can I remember today that that trumps all the alcohol in my life? What do I have in this room, in my heart at this moment that makes me makes me grateful for not drinking any longer. So it's not so much active, it's more of a passive recovery I'm in now. I don't have those feelings when I mean, they hit me every now and then. Don't lie. We went last weekend. We went to the Oktoberfest here in Addison near Dallas, and has a lot of beer drinking going on. And at the same respect, it's like, oh man, sometimes you just wish you could have a beer, partake and smells good, that type of thing. But then in the same scenario, I looked around and saw the quality of the social interactions deteriorate around me and the quality of individuals deteriorate around me. And it's not necessarily that everyone's an alcoholic, but you can see traits in other people and it's a definite reminder of why you don't do it. But it's not like I'm craving a drink on a Tuesday morning like I used to, and that's so like I said, it's more of a passive recovery. My life exists as an alcoholic. It will continue to until the day I die. And I will preach the story to anyone that wants to hear it because it's only through people that have told me their story that I felt that I am able and capable of doing it myself. So
That's interesting. Passive. I guess that's a good description of where I am too. Like this passive recovery. I've never thought about it in those terms where, early on it is very active and there's a lot of focus around it. And for me, the passive recovery has been more, how can I be just better in my life, right? Like I've tried to up my fitness again recently and I'm trying to maybe be less angry, more grateful, right? Like you talked about gratitude. I'm really bad at gratitude. It's actually like on my daily journal checklist, and I hardly ever check it off, which is kind of appalling to think about.
yeah.
But it is something that I have to work on. And I think recovery's opened up that space for me to work on those things to be a better overall person. Again, some of them are grounded in like the 12 steps. Some of them are just grounded in good ideas, health, mental health. I still go to therapy. So that's interesting that you say active and passive. I never really thought about it that way. It's pretty good. It's pretty good terminology.
Well, yeah, I think it's like I said, it's just through habit, things become easier.
Yeah.
Addiction is not never an easy nut to crack, but it's relevant, but it doesn't bear the same relevance. Like I woke up in the morning and was like, what can I do today to help the world? Stop drinking, which is, I mean, a great attitude to have. And then there's still a lot of that inside of me. But at the end of the day, I just remember being in that pink cloud phase thinking, my God, this is the most beautiful life that anyone's ever lived. Like, everything's so green and beautiful. And, it's just like, but then, the thought was in my head is like, are things going to go back to normal? Like, is the alarm going to go off and I'm going to like curse at it?
Mm-hmm.
And they do go back to normal. I don't curse at the alarm every day like I used to, obviously, because I'm not hungover every day. But, there are some days that I just want to stay in bed. And there's some days that I just want to watch Netflix and eat 17 bags of popcorn. And those days still happen. And that's okay. So I don't feel as though that is my job to change the world any longer. But I do feel that it is my responsibility to maintain my recovery, help others. But I don't have to be, on the soapbox every day any longer.
Yeah, I love that. So now that you're in Texas and you're, new life, obviously things are shifting. What's the plan for you, in the near future? Like, what are you working on? What are you working towards? How has life shifted for you, like on a professional front?
At this very moment, the plan is that I'm a stay-at-home dad. So I mean, there's a lot of work in that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I spent the summer with the kids. I got here. I had the fortuitous opportunity to get here just as the school was letting out. So I was able to have the whole summer with the two kids, and we had a lot of fun. We learned a lot about each other, and I mean, I'm at 3:30. It's my job to go pick the kids up at school. It's my privilege to go pick the kids up at school and make dinner. My wife often works late, so I'm a single parent a lot of the time, and thus far it's been very fulfilling. Nice. I mean, I can't figure out what any of them like to eat. Obviously, if there's like a nanometer of too much mustard on a sandwich, I'm screwed. So, still working on that. But no, it's been very fulfilling. So, I mean, the goal at this point is to perhaps get the podcast up and running again, and finish the book, because I've got volumes and volumes, and I just need to edit them and get them down, because I've had requests day after day still to put something out there. So continually working on that. While I've been off, I've decided while I'm here in Texas, it's a very good idea that I learn Spanish. So I'm doing that as well. And that's it. Yeah. Just trying to stay busy.
Yeah, I mean, you're a creative person, right? Your writing is, I think it's brilliant. You have a way of expressing yourself that not many people do. I think if you were to put out a book that was, just catered on recovery, it would do very well. But I think you could write just about anything, right? You have a very Sedaris-like quality to you. But I can also see that you're creative, right? You're posting more video driven content, which I think is very visually interesting as well. So
thanks.
You obviously
pure therapy.
Yeah.
Pure therapy.
Listen, you have a creative vibe in you. And I think if you can harness that, and obviously now there's photography floating around in your house, and it could be the right environment to change, and go a different way. And I think that's the other thing that happens to people who find long-term recovery is like, maybe what I was doing before professionally wasn't working. I mean, I feel that way a lot, to be honest, but I also don't feel like I can make that change now. I do love what I do professionally, but I also know that I would probably rather be teaching or something in that ballpark, I think that recovery can afford people the opportunity to shift. And listen, if people are beating down your door for a book, it's not that bad.
I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great spot to be.
If I can move to Texas, you can be a teacher.
Yeah, maybe down the road. I actually applied to be like an adjunct. A lot of guys I work with do like adjunct professor stuff, and I had applied right before the pandemic, which was just bad timing, because obviously colleges kind of changed their model. So maybe in a year or two from now, our one son just started college, so we're kind of getting used to a new routine around this house. Having a college kid.
Corey, I want to see this on your daily checklist.
I have my daily checklist. It is one of my tools.
I'm gonna get on my soapbox.
So speaking of creative, one of my other things that I like to talk about on the podcast is, what people take in media wise. I'm a big sort of TV, music, podcast, any movies, books. I just love taking it all in. And I always ask people, what are they into right now? So I'd be very interested to know what you sort of ingest in that way.
Okay. From the standpoint of television media right now, I can't get enough of anything that's about polygamy. I don't know what it is, but plural lifestyle, not that I have any plan of living it, fascinates me. So if you can give me this, there's obviously a show called Sister Wives, Seeking Sister Wife, which is just absurd. I mean, if you live that lifestyle, that's fine. And I accept you, obviously, but just very entertaining. I mean, that's my guilty pleasure media at the moment.
Okay.
I did actually pull some books out here just to talk about some that have been sort of impactful for me over the years.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I'm currently reading in the recovery vein is Laura McCow's second book, Push Off From Here. We had the opportunity to meet Laura at a book signing in Austin a few years ago, and we've become friends over the years, and she's been very supportive of Stephanie and I. And her writing is absolutely phenomenal, and it's been very impactful for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm working on at the moment. Some of my favorite books from recovery. I've got one here called Blackout by Sarah Hupala. Yeah. This is just a gritty, raw account of her rock bottom story, and it is one of those books that I read and felt very fortunate for my story. She had a rough go of things, and it is fantastic to see her come out on the other end, and that's what that story is. So The Things I Drank to Forget, Blackout by Sarah Hupala. And then my last book in recovery is by Rob Delaney. So I don't know if anyone's, a lot of people are familiar with him, but he was actually the first comedian on Twitter to get to, Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, to get 1 million followers. And his book is called Mother, Wife, Sister, Human, Warrior, Falcon, Yardstick, Turban, Cabbage. And it is, it's a comedy autobiography, but it actually digs into his recovery story as well. And it's just, if you want some light reading that is still very gut-wrenching at times, that's Rob Delaney's book.
All right.
And what I'm reading right now in the non-recovery vein is User's Guide to Democracy, How America Works. Okay. And that's by Nick Covetis and Hannah McCarthy. And that is because I'm new here in the United States. I've always had a pretty big interest in U.S. politics. So I've decided to take it to a next level and learn about what the hell the Electoral College is. So that's that. And then I guess from a music standpoint, my favorite album of the past 10 years is by Ray LaMontagne. It's called Ouroboros, and it is dark, brooding, moody, and depressing. And it was the album that I found a few months after my rock bottom, and it carried me through. It's angry, it's soft, it's sad. His wife was diagnosed with a terminal illness during this time span, and it is kind of akin to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. It is phenomenal. A lot of people don't think of him as a very sort of deep and depthy artist, but it's the best album I've heard in a long time.
He is really good. Renee and I have gotten to see him live once.
Nice.
He was an opener for somebody we saw. And just a side note, his estate in Massachusetts just went up for sale. So if anybody has,
really?
Yeah, I think it's like $5 million estate, which kind of was
Okay, let
like,
me go grab my checkbook.
yeah, it really kind of shocked me. I didn't realize like Ray was living in that kind of
Yeah.
lifestyle, you know. But it was a very nice
You think
house.
he'd buy some new pants? My
Yeah,
God.
yeah. Like he didn't strike me as the $5 million estate guy, but
Yeah.
um, then I started to kind of I revisited a lot of his stuff, and he has such a big catalog of music. It's
Yeah.
he's put a lot out over the years, so great recommendation there. And I think it's very admirable that you are digging into our democracy because so many people that live here don't care about it at all. So the fact that you want to learn more is pretty awesome. We're in a sad state of affairs at the moment, but hopefully we can.
There's hope.
Yeah, I think there's
There's
hope.
hope.
There's hope. There's always hope.
That's having lived in Canada. Obviously, we have a reputation for being nice individuals, very apologetic, and but just being here and experiencing Southern culture. I mean, beautiful, beautiful people here,
Yeah.
just kind, and the worldview is that the States is just people fighting at Kroger in
Right.
the line about their political beliefs. But I have found that when you're out here and just doing the thing, it's not the way it's depicted around the world, that's for certain. But I mean, there are pockets of it, don't get me wrong, but living in Texas, which is a deeply red state, I anticipated that there would be a lot more overt sort of opinion, and I haven't found that to be so.
And I think part of that, I mean, this is my opinion, and people can say I'm crazy, but I think that what we portray to the world is our small pockets in cities, right? So you see these like very polarized cities, but when you go out into the suburbs and into the rural areas, people have to coexist and help each other out, right? Like I help my neighbor when his tree falls down. He might not have the same political views as me, but we have a common goal here, right? Our street has to be maintained properly, and we have to sort of live in harmony. And I think what we portray out to the world is this like hyper polarizing viewpoint of the cities, and yeah, they are hard to be in right now. I go to New York City for work. It is not the most pleasant place to be. I know Portland and San Francisco and all these places are, but they're like, people are not. I don't know. I think the city thing is like you're on top of each other. You're not really working together. It's very individualistic. But go out to a hard place to live. Like go out to rural Maine and survive a winter. You don't care what your neighbor thinks about politically. You care if they can get your driveway plowed, right? Like
For sure.
it's just
Yeah.
a different viewpoint, and that's most of America. And I think that we just need to kind of turn down the echo chamber media and turn down the social media and remember where we came from, and we can do amazing things once we just kind of focus on our street and then maybe focus on your town and then your county. Like I think that's where this all starts to change, not at the national level. That's how I feel. I'm a big advocate of like, take care of your street and then things will start to happen, but we'll see how that goes. And I love all your TV shows, Sister Wives. That's one that we'll put on when we're falling asleep. I love Cody. I think he's a real trip.
Yeah, yeah, he's definitely in his mindset. He loves himself, but
Yeah, he's managed to like turn off like four of, I forget how many.
they're dropping like flies.
Yeah, they just keep dropping away from him, and he's like, he just plants that flag like, I'm correct.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for that guy.
Well, yeah, we can identify with that, I think.
Yeah, right.
In a way.
Yeah. He managed to run off all of them in some way, shape, or form. Nuts. And then Laura. I mean, again, I started out listening to the Home Podcast. I listened to those two sort of kind of live their podcast life, and now they're both on their own, Laura and Holly. Laura lives in an area where my older son was born, up on the North Shore of Massachusetts. So I always felt some sort of connection to her through where she was living at the time when I first found her. But I think that they've done a ton for the recovery world. And, it's interesting that you had two female writers and then Rob. I do feel like the space now is finding a like the recovery space used to be very male dominated, 12 step. It was like, the patriarchy and all that, male driven recovery where females were a little bit to the back. And I think it's
Well, yeah, in
flipping.
the big book wasn't there a chapter to the wife of the alcoholic?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think that there's a big shift now. And, I think it's becoming more inclusive and it can only better the space, right, for everybody to understand that it affects, not only just white dudes, but it affects, everybody. And the fact that two of your books were Sarah and Laura are really a testament to that.
Well, yeah. Speaking of Laura, I mean, if I could, just say something about her. If you are looking for an alternate recovery space, her TLC, the Luckiest Community
Yeah.
TLC. It's you can search it on Instagram, but it is a paid subscription based recovery community, and I've had the opportunity to speak for them on a few occasions, and I joined for a stint. And it's a really sort of holistic place to meet in a Zoom style format that sort of does not function with the same sort of dogma that AA can, but it's a really useful and great community for some as well. And something that if you're looking for an alternative space, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I'll definitely link that in the show notes.
Yeah.
I have not partaken in any of that, but I do see it online, and I know there's a lot of folks that we both know in common that have kind of flowed through that program and are in part of it. This week for me, media wise, it's hard to do this week in and week out. I am going to go with the EP that was put out by Zach Bryan. He obviously is like the big country singer of the moment, and I'm not like the biggest country music guy, but I like Zach's style, and my younger son sings his one song at karaoke every time we go, so he's kind of fallen into the rotation. But his new EP is great. He has, I think it's 5 songs. Each one of them are pretty darn perfect. And he has Bon Iver on one and Noah Kahan on another.
Oh,
And I think it's just a solid 5-song EP. And I just love that, we live in this age of digital music where people can drop a 5-song EP and then maybe a single the next week and just kind of keep music flowing. So for me, it was the Bon Iver song that just is, it's called Boys of Faith. It's a very solid song. From a TV standpoint, I don't know. I mean, I'm in the middle of watching Suits on Netflix, and it's silly and ridiculous and about, these rich lawyers and hedge fund guys and everything that I'm not totally about, but I love I love the show. I don't know why. And so that's my TV recommendation for the week. I know books, but I will give shout out to a podcast that just started up. This is a Canadian broadcasting podcast, and they put out some of the most riveting audio that I've heard. And I think it's really just David Ridgen is the host and producer. But he puts out a lot of podcasts about Indigenous crime in Canada and people who have gone missing, and they're forgotten stories, and he brings a lot of light to them, and he does it in a very touching way, and the audio is just so compelling. So it's the new season of Someone Knows Something. He has a couple others. I think it's The Last Call is the other one that he has. So if anybody has time to research the CBC podcasts, they put out some great content. I know, Pete, you probably are familiar with the CBC.
yes, I am the Canadian Broadcasting Company. Yes,
Yeah. I don't know.
we all own shares in it.
Yeah.
I pay for it. I used to pay for it every time that I paid my income tax. So yeah,
Oh, yeah. I mean,
entirely publicly funded. Yep.
I got my taste when I was up there this summer in Vancouver and Montreal. So,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but David Ridgen he really is, he puts together some great podcasts. So if you like crime podcasts and, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I do enjoy a good crime podcast still. So, that's all I
Is
got
he a
for the week.
monogamist?
No, I don't, yeah, I hope, I don't know.
Because I probably need to get off the plural wives
Yeah,
thing.
he
Yeah. So
probably is. It's interesting. I don't know much about David, but I've listened to, I want to say 12 seasons of his podcast, and he just,
oh wow, check it out.
yeah, he has such a great production quality about it. He's sort of doing the interviews live and in the field, and he travels quite a bit for it, and the cases are all very, interesting cases of people who had gone missing maybe 15 years ago. And in a lot of the times they're in these very rural parts of Canada where, it just is kind of not even looked at, right? These are people that nobody, quote, nobody cares about, right? And I think that every, Canada has that and the states have that, right? Like some people just go missing and nobody cares where they went. And to me, that is about as sad as it gets, that somebody can just disappear and literally nobody cares. So it's kind of it kind of depresses me, but I can't not listen to them. I think it's important to know that those stories exist.
Certainly.
Yeah. So, but that's what I got for the week. And, Pete, I have wanted to talk to you like this for a while, so I'm glad we got a chance to do this.
Me too. Thanks a lot for asking me. It's been great to be here.
Yeah, and if you ever kick your podcast up, I will step on if you are guest
Sounds
hosting
great.
or whatever you plan to do with it. I am sure it'll be entertaining. So
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
yeah, and if everybody
I just want to ask you one more thing.
Sure.
You were talking earlier about karaoke.
Yes.
That's sober karaoke.
Yeah, I don't do it. My son does it.
Oh, you don't do it. Okay. I was gonna say I would gladly be mauled by a bear over sober karaoke.
I've done karaoke when I was drinking. He wants me to go up and sing with him, and I probably will. We just haven't gone since baseball started in the fall. We've had less time, but he is my younger son is quite the showman. He dresses up in full cowboy regalia. He's got the boots and the hat, and inside his hat he has a picture of his brother, like he's gonna go out on the plains and be out there for like 2 months.
That's great.
I don't know how. I don't know. We have two sons. My older son is like as straight as they come, like just like militaristic. I got to get this done, and then we have the 11-year-old who's, dresses up as a cowboy to sing karaoke, and baseball player with chains hanging off of him, and it's so strange to me how we produce two kids completely opposite of each other. But that's how it goes, right? But I will let you know when I sing karaoke for real.
Excellent.
So
Can't wait. Put it on your list.
I will. It's on my list.
Attaboy.
And then once I do it, you have to do it though, right? Like that's the
Yeah, sure, whatever. I'll do it. I'll do anything once.
All right. Well, thanks again, Pete, and I appreciate
my pleasure.
The time. I know it's hard to carve out an hour for all of us. So, but we will be in touch, and I will see you all next week.
Sounds good, sir.
Thanks.
See you soon.